Welcome to Weencast. Ween off the cuff. Riverdale, Season 7, Episode 8, Hoop Dreams. I am your Ween. This week, Reggie finally returns. Hardcore Ween fans will know that I love Reggie. Not just because Charles Melton, the actor who plays him, is a kind of absurdly handsome man who just stands around looking hot on TV, and not because he has perhaps the juiciest lips ever known to man, but just because I think Reggie's a fantastic character in that he has kind of no coherent core, but no matter what, somehow Charles Melton takes that pivot and just makes it work. This is Reggie now. This week, he's a car thief. This week, he's a scammer. This week, he is betraying Veronica. This week, he's in love with Veronica. And this week, he's uh, a basketball prodigy from the sticks, from the little town of Duck Creek. And he's going to save Riverdale's basketball team. Because as we learned from Jughead in the intro narration, some towns are football towns, some towns are hockey towns, and some towns are basketball towns. Now, for the previous 7 years, we've all known Riverdale to be a football town because we watched so much goddamn football. We watched Archie play it, we watched him have war flashbacks to the trench days, but it was football and Veronica's dad was there. Duh. But anyway, now that's not true. Riverdale's not a football town anymore. It's a basketball town. Football got destroyed when the comet hit, and it's about basketball now. And Archie's dad, dear departed Fred, was in his youth the B-ball champ. Um, but now, with Archie, Julian, Fangs, the team blows. The team super blows, and they keep losing games. And after the game, the latest game, which they lost, they lost bad. Archie, tries to cheer folks up with a rousing speech, and we tried our best, and next time we'll get 'em. But Captain No Eyebrows, Shitweasel Julian, of course, is horrible about it. And then, depressed, leaving the locker room, Archie talks to Uncle Frank, and Uncle Frank says, well, they've got a chance now because the Blossoms have given him permission to recruit a farm kid, Reggie the Blur Mantle. I've been trying to decide if, well, first of all, the Blur is just a stupid nickname. It's just a bad nickname. But I've also been trying to decide if it's like a reference to the later seasons of Smallville, a proto CW classic in that it was on the WB. I don't remember if it went long enough to be on the CW when the WB became part of the terrible transmogrification that created the CW. But the point is, in the later season of Smallville, they didn't want to name Superman yet, even though he was Clark Kent and he was living in Metropolis and he was saving people. And so they had everybody refer to him as the Blur because he was moving so fast they could only see like a red and blue blur. And that was stupid. So I wouldn't be surprised if Riverdale was referencing it. Also enjoying themselves after the game are Tony and Cheryl, who are making out in the locker room while everyone else is gone because they were doing cheer at the ball game. But then Cheryl ruins things by asking Tony if she wants to go steady, even though obviously they can't go steady in public due to homophobia reasons and also racism reasons. But, they can go steady in their hearts. But Tony kind of gets wigged and thinks it's a little square, and they're both kind of sad. Next day, Archie and Uncle Frank drive out to uh, Reggie's farm, which is full of goats. And Reggie's basically Clark Kent, which I think lends credence to my The Blur theory. He is a big, handsome fella, wearing a plaid, got nice hair. He's got a little bit of an S curl, and he's lifting entire bales of hay himself, putting them on the truck. Um, and Archie is a little bit unintentionally racist microaggression to him. He's like, "Oh, you're from Korea?" And Reggie's like, "No, my mom is from Korea," implying, although it's never stated in the episode, that his mother and father had some kind of relation that developed during the Korean War, because we also do learn quickly that Reggie's dad is a veteran of the Korean War, um, which is also interesting because it suggests possibly that Reggie's parents may be different than they were in the original timeline, because Reggie's dad was a fairly significant side character in the earlier seasons. He was a very bad dad, he was very abusive, but he was also notably also played by an Asian actor. Then again, I mean, it's not like it's impossible that Reggie's dad could be an Asian veteran of the Korean War, an Asian American veteran of the Korean War who married a Korean woman. But it does seem like they're kind of setting it up that the whole point of Reggie's family in the 1950s is that, he's facing anti-Asian racism and racism about his parents being in a mixed race marriage. So that's very interesting. The question of who did the whose like family history did the comet change and why? But in this case, we know why. It's so they can tell a story about racism and Reggie as a mixed race Asian person facing racism in the 1950s. And we find out more about that because now that Reggie has been brought onto the Riverdale team, he has to live with Archie and Archie's mom and Uncle Frank because he lives so far out in the sticks he couldn't come to Riverdale High otherwise. And he tells them all about how he got recruited to Stonewall Prep but dropped out. He has to run the family farm because his dad was wounded in the war, but they don't get any government support like Archie's family does because the GI Bill is being administered in a racist fashion. And Archie's like, gosh, well, I never thought about racism except for the one episode where we were supposed to. And I learned last episode about homophobia. Are you saying there's even more kinds of discrimination I gotta find out about? And what he's going to learn in this episode is yes. But while he's settling Reggie in, Reggie gets to take over the first season Jughead role of guy who sleeps on a cot in Archie's room with him. Reggie sees Betty through the sex window and he's like, "Who's that hot girl?" And Archie's like, "Oh gosh, we gotta close the curtains. We're gonna get into trouble." Betty, of course, has no idea about this because at the time she's speaking with her father, who we don't know yet if he is a serial killer again in this world. And now that we know parents can seriously change through time, he might not be, but I'm pretty sure he is. I mean, come on. Anyway, he is suggesting to Betty that he and Dr. Werther's think she should get more exercise in order to tire her out and kill her sex drive, and that she should spend more time with girls, which is a big um, oversight on Hal's part because, of course, we all know that Betty is obviously rampantly bisexual and will fuck anything if it comes within her reach. So they've encouraged her to join the Vixens, which is another oversight on that part since they don't know it's a secret den of sapphic desire. Um, so this is going to be, I think, a big success for Betty joining the cheerleading squad, even though she thinks it's a big oppression right now. Next day at school, Lizzo, the hot, kind of soft butch serpent girl who always shows up just every so often to kind of flirt with Tony and remind her that she could be having sex with another hot biker babe instead of Cheryl, um, does that, approaches Tony, flirts with her, reminds her she could be having sex with a hot biker babe instead of Cheryl, and points out that this is a pattern Tony has repeated before, apparently, of dating girls who are in the closet and then breaking up with them because it always had a good end date. Like, there was always a point where they would either have to choose to come out or continue on with their lives of privilege, and that gave Tony kind of an out. And Tony's like, oh my god, look, it's Tabitha, and runs off to talk to Tabitha. Because Tabitha's back from her tour with the NAACP and Emmett Till's mother, and she reports that she saw a lot of horrible racism, and it was very important work, but also very depressing, which tracks. And Tabitha is a little bit boggled that in her absence, Tony has become a cheerleader, and that she's not doing any of her writing. Um, and Tony reflects on that as well. So the rest of our heroes, meet up, hanging out in the lounge. Is that what that room is called? The room where they're always hanging out at the school. And Betty's talking about how she's forced on the cheer team. And Veronica's talking about how now, yes, 2 days ago she served popcorn at the movie theater, but today she owns the movie theater. This was really a Veronica on a roll episode. She's a little bit sexually insane in this episode, and she really hams it up. And when Archie and Reggie come in and Archie introduces him, she calls Reggie a flutterbum, which sounds like, I mean, it sounds offensive somehow, but whatever. She calls several other men in this episode of Flutterbum, and I don't like it. I don't feel good about it. Reggie, twist of the fucking century, continues to be attracted to Betty, which is a pairing I don't think the show has ever really explored before, which is good. It's a good sign that they're really getting in all of the possible matchups that we could think of before the end of the show, because that means we're always one step closer. Like we're always one Xenos paradox step closer to gay Archie. Um, Reggie, Veronica immediately makes moves on Reggie, like that they're a little scary. And he's kind of freaked out, and he tells her he's never seen a movie. He doesn't know what movies are. He could never come to the movie theater because he's never heard of movies. And then he needs directions to the gym, and Veronica, Kevin, and Betty are all leap at the chance to guide him. And Archie's like, I'll take him, because even Archie can sense a bad situation sometimes. Meanwhile, side plot, Tabitha approaches Jughead and is like, hey, Jughead, remember I was going on a trip and you were supposed to help me, like, know what the homework was? And Jughead's like, oh, shit. I forgot all about that. And to be honest, Jughead, I forgot all about that plot, too. But Tabitha's quick to forgive him, and he explains about how he's a comic book writer now. He's been a little bit busy. He dropped out of school for a little bit. He went back to school. Talks about how he's friends with Brad Rayberry because he has no idea that the milkman murdered Brad Rayberry last episode. And Tabitha's really excited because she likes Brad's work too and she wants to meet him. So now they have a reason to hang out together. Yay! Over at the movie theater, Kevin comes in. Veronica accuses him of coming to see Singing in the Rain yet again, but no, he just needs a job because he's bored and he quit the basketball team and his dad hates him due to homophobia reasons. So then Veronica does something troubling and unethical, which is that she gives Kevin a job, but she also asks him to hook her up with Clay, um, which is a conflict of interest for several reasons. Number one, obviously, Kevin is Clay's boyfriend, even though it's secret. So that's a conflict of interest for Kevin. Number two, Veronica is Clay's employer. Uh, And one thing that's important is that you should avoid trying to fuck your employees. You should avoid trying to fuck your employees. Um, I'm not saying it's 100% hard and fast rule. I'm just saying it's a good rule of thumb. But maybe this is one of the reasons that we don't make let like have teenagers operate large businesses. Maybe. Maybe that's why we should have rules about what jobs teenagers should have. But as we know, Riverdale, 67 years in the past and the future, presumably operates under the totally repealed child labor laws that they're already working on in many states in the U.S. So Veronica can own her own business and um, sexually coerce Clay as her employee. And I'm sure it's all legal 67 years in the past and the future. Back on the b-ball court. Back on the b-ball court. Back on the b-ball court. Uncle Frank says it's time for a little PvP. And he says they're gonna have two teams. I'm sorry. I don't know why back on the b-ball court hit me like that. Back on the b-ball court. There's going to be a team where Reggie's the captain and a team where Julian is the captain. But for some reason, instead of having them alternate player selections, Uncle Frank's just like, yeah, split up between the two guys. And so obviously everybody else joins Julian's team, and only Archie and Fangs join Reggie's team. And then Reggie asks them if they can have Dilton play on their team too. And Julian's like, well, the water boy. But Dilton feels honored that somebody is nice to him for once in this goddamn show. And so they play the game, and Julian is really mean to Dilton and like pushes him down, but Reggie helps him up and like hypes him up, and all the cheerleaders are watching, and Betty's a little turned on by seeing how good Reggie is at basketball. And it's down to the wire, and it's gonna be the ball that determines the game. And because of all the support he received from Reggie and Archie, Dilton sinks the final basket and wins it for Team Reggie. And after the game, they're all in the locker room changing, and Archie's like, "Gosh, guys, wasn't that fun? Let's all go out for burgers." And everybody else is like, "We hate you now." And Reggie's like, "They hate us now, Arch." And Archie's like, "Gosh, but why?" And at cheer practice, Betty shows up and learns that beyond just like going to the games and dressing up in cute outfits and being like, yay, Bulldogs, they have a weird feminine labor task that they've been assigned where each of them has a particular player that they're supposed to hang out with and help him with his homework and bake cookies for him and stuff. And this is so weird and gross and stupid that I have to assume that this was probably real because it's so what the fuck that I can only assume they would not be able to make it up. And Betty gets matched with Reggie. And you know what? She's like, okay, I could do a little feminine labor for Reggie if you know what I mean. But Tony, after this weird, um, legally mandated heteronormativity session, is like, I gotta quit the cheer team. This is kind of gross. And Cheryl's like, are you sure you're not quitting the cheer team because you want to break up with me? And Tony's like, now that you say it, yeah, I'm quitting the cheer team because I kind of want to break up with you also. And that's sad for Cheryl, obviously. Meanwhile, Jughead and Tabitha, they go to Brad Raybury's apartment. He doesn't respond, but they don't think there's anything out of the ordinary. They leave him a note, and Jughead's like, say, Tabitha, you wanna go to the movies? And Tabitha's like, gosh, Jughead, I kind of do want to go to the movies. It's a science fiction feature with Ray Harryhausen effects. And they're like, oh, gee whiz. And honestly, they're so real for that, TBH. And at the movie theater, um, they buy all the movie snacks, and they're just for Jughead. And there's a whole boom of Jughead naming every snack, and they're all stupid Riverdale snacks, like their senior mints and skit scat candy bars and butterflingers. So they all sound like vaguely like names for like scat fetish porn videos also. But that's fine. And then once they get all that for him, he's like, "And do you want anything from Tabitha?" And Tabitha's like, "What? Jughead, you're gonna eat all that?" And then Veronica's like, "Gosh, Jughead, you run up a real high tab. That'll be 75 cents." And you're like, "Oh, ho, 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 the 1950s." Um, but then when they walk away, Veronica's like, Jughead and I were dating for a little while, but then I broke up with him, uh, Clay." And Clay's like, "Okay, how's this relevant to me?" She's like, "And I mean, now that I'm single, you could date me, Clay." And she's actually harassing him, and Kevin is watching while he sweeps the lobby, and he's kind of stricken, and he should be. At school the next day, Betty and Reggie are doing homework together, and Reggie's like, "You don't have to do this, Betty. This is weird." Um, and then Betty explains, she's like, "No, I have to do this. See, this is my punishment for being sexually insane." And then Reggie doesn't want to hang out with her anymore. He's terrified by her. Um, and on the one hand, we could read this as slut shaming. That's what it's called when sluts get shamed. Um, but on the other hand, look, we know Betty, right? We've been hanging out with Betty for about 7 years now. She's crazy. she's a little she's a little crazy with the coconuts. Um, she's a little bit intense, especially when it comes to getting the nut. And so, TBH, I don't blame Reggie. I don't blame Reggie. And Archie follows up on that, trying to befriend Reggie and being like, "Oh, you want to hang out, buddy? You want to be pals?" And Reggie's like, "No, I don't want to hang out. I don't want to be pals. I'm getting in, getting out." Meanwhile, Tony invites Tabitha and Clay to join with her to form a Black Literary Society club where they can do writing and art, and they're going to publish like a quarterly journal with all the art of the black students of Riverdale High. And that would be more convincing if it didn't feel like Tony, Tabitha, and Clay were the three only black students at Riverdale High. But you know what? They're three talented, intelligent, and uncomfortably sexy young people. So I believe they will put out a great literary journal. Um, and in the course of describing that, she does reveal that she has dropped cheerleading, and that's how she's going to have time to manage this club. And she admits to her friends that, yeah, she really only joined cheerleading because she had a crush on Cheryl, so. But she broke up with Cheryl because simply they're too different. And in explaining this, this is probably the second time that Riverdale has ever acknowledged the existence of whiteness as a category when Tony rightfully points out that Cheryl is a rich white person, as well as being part of the most prominent family in town. So it was a little bit hard to date her and to mesh their lives together. And Tabitha's understanding, but Clay is like, well, gee willikers, Tony, if you really like her, you should you should give it a try. Still, you can accept and appreciate your differences with Cheryl, just like me and Kevin accept our differences with each other. Since I'm black and he's white, and I have this interest and he has that interest, and then Tony says, "Yeah, but here's the thing, Clay. At least you and Kevin are still both preps. Lest we forget this is Riverdale, and your like high school social group stereotype is almost nigh on as significant as your racial category for navigating your social and romantic life." Meanwhile, at the movie theater, um, Veronica comes in and she's like, "Kevin, why won't Clay reciprocate my flirting?" And Kevin's like, "Veronica, you have to fucking stop. Clay is gay, and on top of that, you're being creepy." And Veronica's response to this Veronica's response to this is like, "Oh, perfect. I knew you were both secret friends of Dorothy." the line the line "secret friends of Dorothy," if we could just unpack that phrase a little bit. The phrase "secret friends of Dorothy," like, the reason for the existence of the phrase "friends of Dorothy" is as a euphemism so that we can keep the secret of being gay, right? Like, to say "friends of Dorothy" necessarily kind of implies a certain level of secret, right? It's a phrase that comes out of a time where it's very dangerous to be out, and the use of a euphemism in this case is to not state the fact, the gay part. So when you say "secret friends of Dorothy" as opposed to "public friends of Dorothy," which is that's just being gay. That's just called being gay. Uh, I knew you were secret friends of Dorothy. And Kevin's like, what the hell are you talking about, Veronica? And she's like, this was all a test. Me sexually harassing Clay in the workplace relentlessly was all a test to find out if you and him were really gay because I have not had enough gay best friends in Riverdale since I moved from Hollywood. And she says something like, the only thing better than having a boyfriend who's a hunk is having boy friends who are hunks. I've always enjoyed going out more with Tony and Tab than I have with Steve and Dennis. And then Kevin says, who are Steve and Dennis? And Veronica says, Steve McQueen and Dennis Hopper, which forces us to live in a world where Veronica goes out with Steve McQueen and Dennis Hopper and doesn't have a good time because they're not gay enough. Wait. I had to pause at this part actually. I had to pause about every third frame in this scene because I was making notes too quickly and the hits were coming too fast and too hard. It pushed me to the edge, Your Honor. And then Veronica says, oh, by the way, Kevin, are you sure Clay doesn't swing both ways? Because I would get with him. Just, you know. And Kevin's like, no, he's gay. I'm gay. We're not going to have sex with you, Veronica. We're not going to have a threesome with you. And she's like, okay. But she's still excited that now these two men, whom she has sexually harassed one of them to the point where the other had to confront her about it, are her new gay best friends. Because Veronica is a nutcase. Veronica is a maniac. Veronica is a girl boss. Veronica doesn't take no for an answer, which means that she doesn't really consider consent. And Veronica's sexual fetish, as we learned last episode or the episode before, as we learned in the episode where she gave Betty, she forced Betty to pose in lingerie for her so that she could later force Betty to pose in lingerie. For Archie, Veronica, more so than sex, just gets off on just fucking with people's minds. Back on the b-ball court. Back on the b-ball court. Julian gives an update to the team. He admirably delivers the line, my parents are hosting the Bulldog Booster basketball mixer. And it's going to be a fundraiser for a new gym, and it's going to be a welcome party for Reggie. And everybody's got to come because all the cheerleaders are going to be there. Reggie's not buying it. Archie tries to invite him, be like, well, you're the guest of honor, Reggie. And he's like, fuck no. I'm not coming. And Archie's like, well, why won't you just be friendly, Reg? And so then Reggie explains to him about racism and about how when he went to Stonewall Prep, first of all, Stonewall Prep, flashback to Stonewall Prep, Brett is there. For those of you who don't remember Riverdale season 4, Brett was Jughead's. Okay, first of all, his name is Brett Weston Wallace. Brett, Brett Weston Wallace. Brett Weston Wallace was Jughead's evil, homoerotic roommate at Stonewall Prep who tried definitely tried to have sex with him and then tried to kill him and then was part of the group of preppies who did kill him except they didn't kill him except they did kill him except then they didn't kill him. And then he faked his own death but he wasn't dead. Anyway, cameo, Brett cameo by Brett. Brett's in the locker room at Stonewall Prep. He has filled Reggie's locker with rice and he is calling him racist names. And I think this might be the first time that on Riverdale we have like had anyone actually deploy like racist epithets. Although I would have to rewatch the episode where Tabitha travels back in time to every time that Riverdale was racist to fix racism. Um, but I feel like they didn't use any actual like explicit racist language, although they did have the person who vandalized Pops by putting Nazi symbols on it, which was pretty fucked up. But I do think it's interesting that here Brett deploys actually like explicitly racist language against Reggie, um, and that we can kind of like the racist language that they would have to deploy against the black characters for Riverdale is so toxic discursively that like you can't actually even put it on TV. Whereas you deploy a racist language against Reggie, who is Asian, we can put it on TV in order to discuss it. Um, I just think that's interesting. Um, anyway, so Brett's back. Brett's racist. Brett bullied Reggie so much that Reggie had to drop out of school. And Archie's like, oh my god, racism! He just found out. Even though we started the season with an episode about Emmett Till, Archie's just catching up, and it's not his fault. It's not just because he's white, it's because he's dumb. He's also very dumb. Outside of school, Tony approaches Cheryl to ask for funding for the Black Literary Club because Cheryl is like the class president or whatever, so she's the one who makes all the requests for student funding. And for those of us who have said, oh, Riverdale never has character development, Riverdale character development doesn't make any sense, none of the characters change or experience growth or whatever, blah, 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 shut up. Cheryl is kind and magnanimous in this scene and promises to do her best to secure some funding for Tony and also asks seriously about Tony's motivation for their breakup and if it had anything to do with her, um, with Cheryl being white and not understanding a lot of Tony's life in that way. And if you think that the original Cheryl season 1, Cheryl season 2, Cheryl season 3, Cheryl season 4, maybe even Cheryl season 5 would have been capable of being this normal to the person who had just broken up with them. Actually, this abnormal. I don't think it's even normal for people to really be that nice to people who have broken up with them. Um, to be this thoughtful to someone who broke up with her, I think you should go back and review those seasons. And I know we're 67 years back in the past and the future, so can we really say that this is like a linear growth pattern that Cheryl's on? No. Can you say you're on a linear growth pattern? I don't fucking think so. The Bulldog Soiree, the Bulldog Booster Basketball Mixer, at the Blossoms Manor. I don't remember which manor this is. Is this Thornhill? Is this the other one? I think it's Thornhill. Anyway, at the Blossom Manor is going on, and everybody's dressed up nice, and Archie's wearing his little like uh blue and gold cardigan with the R on it, and his little bow tie. I love this dude. What a little guy. I love him. Um, and he and Betty run into each other, and they chat about, oh, what's it like being sexually insane? Um, how's it going? You know, uh, Archie says, oh, adults just don't get it, do they? That's so true, Archie. Adults just don't get it. Um, but then he gets called over to talk with the Blossoms and Uncle Frank and some rando, and Clifford and the other adults are being straight up racist about Reggie, saying lots of offensive things. And Archie tries to defend Reggie, but he's starting to realize about how racism is a systemic problem and is a belief system held by many people who don't even really acknowledge that that's what they believe or that it's a problem, as does Cheryl, who is in the house at the time for the party, obviously, and is overhearing as well. Meanwhile, Reggie, refusing to attend the party, goes to the Babylonian movie theater because he's never been to the movies before. No, he claims that he's been to the movies before, but I don't believe him. Uh, and Veronica's like, oh, Reginald, hello. I see you finally come to my theater. Could it be that my presence here had something to do with it? And Reggie says, no. I forgot you even worked here. And Veronica's like, excuse me? I don't work here. I own this business. And Reggie's like, okay, can I have a small popcorn? And she's not gonna let this go. Now that she can't sexually harass Clay anymore, I'm pretty sure she's gonna start sexually harassing Reggie. Meanwhile, Jughead and Tabitha are hanging out together at his train car, and Tabitha gives Jug a book by W.E.B. Du Bois, and Jughead's excited about it, and she points out that they should read together one of his stories, which is called The Comet, which is like, oh my god, the comet, the comet, the comet, the comet sent us back 67 years into the past and the future. And she describes the story of the comet. It's this kind of science fiction interracial relationship story about a comet impacting New York City, and only two people are left alive, a black man and a white woman, and so they have to kind of bond and form a relationship to survive, and they're the last people on Earth. And it's a compelling story because, number one, it interfaces with the comet. 67 years in the past and the future, it struck Riverdale. Also, the interracial dynamics of Jughead and Tabitha's relationship. Also, the fact that the comet broke them apart after they had such a beautiful romance last season, too. Honestly, I'm gonna be real with you guys. Last season, in the last season finale, when the comet was gonna hit, and Tabitha used her time powers to let her and Jughead live through an entire romantic life together, and they had the kids and the grandkids, and then they got old and they kissed one last time. I cried a little bit. I'm gonna be real with you, dog. That hit. That hit a little bit. Um, but then the comet hit and they didn't remember each other. But now maybe they do remember each other. Also, there's another Tabitha that's searching through the time stream, every time stream. Hopefully, we'll follow up on that. But it's Riverdale, so maybe we might not ever. Back at Reggie's house, and by Reggie's house I mean Archie's house, but it's Archie's house where Reggie now lives. Reggie and Archie discussed the mixer because Reggie stayed away. He went to the movies and now he's at home reading Super Duck. And Archie's like, honestly, I don't want to talk about it because you were right, racism's real. And that's still weighing heavy on Archie's mind the next day at school. When at basketball practice, Uncle Frank can't be there, so Julian, being the captain of the team, is in charge, and he's being racist. He's being explicitly racist to Reggie, so Archie knocks him the fuck out because Archie rules. And Archie gives a whole speech on how basically, okay, this sucks. Racism sucks. You guys suck. Uh, Reggie's here to literally save our basketball team. So why? Why are you being racist to him? What's the point of this? He's supposed to be here to save our team. What is your fucking problem? And I've spent a lot of time dunking on Riverdale's treatment of race, but I'm not gonna lie to you, it kinda ruled when Archie punched Julian and said racism sucks. 'Cause he's right. Racism sucks. No eyebrows Julian sucks. Being a good guy rules. Yeah, go Archie. And afterwards in the locker room, he assures Reggie he wasn't doing it for white savior reasons. He was doing it because he was really over Julian, and he's really stressed about realizing his beloved hometown is full of racists, uh, and is actually just as bad as everywhere else. And Reggie's like, it kind of ruled when you hit Julian. I think we could be friends. Let's go to Pops. And so they're buddies now, and I like that. I like when Reggie and Archie are friends. I like when they're enemies too, but either way. And Cheryl gets the money for Tony's club, and she gives it to Tony, and Tony's like, hey, this is sweet. How'd you convince Principal Featherhead to fund a black literary society? And Cheryl's like, it's actually money that was earmarked for something else. Don't ask any more questions. So I hope that we get more hilarious follow up uh, on that. And Tony is so moved that she asks Cheryl out on a date, and maybe they can reconcile. We'll see. But of course, the episode concludes with Jughead headed over to Brad Rayberry's apartment, hoping that he'll be in this time, only to find Sheriff Kevin's dad there. Brad has been found dead of an apparent suicide with a suicide note. And Jughead is really sad because he had a decent father figure for an episode and a half, interrupted by the part where he totally violated that man's trust. And they hated each other for a little bit. And then he was so excited to tell Brad that he has a cool friend who's a girl who probably is, well, I think we could say a better girlfriend for him than Veronica, despite what Veronica thinks. But instead, Brad is dead. And that's what this week's episode was about. And frankly, I thought it was a fucking banger. It was a killer episode. I liked it. I know what you're thinking. Tune in. Riverdale's biggest fan gives Riverdale 10 out of 10 stars once again. Well, okay. True. I'm excited that we're getting back on track with the Riverdale invents social justice in the 1950s plotline. I hope that that's going to keep rolling. I'm excited that Reggie's back. I love Reggie. Reggie's a star to me. Reggie's a star to me. That's it. That's Reggie's a star to me. Um, I'm excited that Archie is becoming disillusioned with the town because I love it when Archie's disillusioned with the town and it makes him like join a union and become like left wing Jesus who builds the railroad to hell. Not when he gets disillusioned with the town and he forms masked fascist vigilante groups, but you know, Archie's a complicated guy for someone who is really, really stupid. So that's kind of what I love about him. Um, yeah, I'm excited. I'm hyped. I'm happy that Tabitha is back. Um, I'm hyped that she is friends with Jughead again, and I'm hyped that she is also friends with Tony and gets scenes with other characters besides Jughead. I hope that continues. Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Uh, yeah, yep. And I'm glad that Veronica is a total terrifying nightmare of a human being. I love her. She's an idol. Uh, she should keep doing weird sexual torments to people. Because they're pretend. So it's not. No one was hurt. It's a pretend story, and it's funny. And I'm so excited because the promo for next week's episode was literally just a montage of Betty having sexual fantasies about every character on the show. She is making out with Veronica, she's making out with Archie, she's making out with Jughead, she's making out with Fangs, she's making out with Reggie nude in the showers. Probably there was somebody else that she might make out with Cheryl. Point is, she's making out with everybody. She's sexually insane. She's so horny her head's gonna fly off. Queen. Girl boss. An inspiration to the extremely horny of this world. I think that kind of says it all. That's another killer episode of Riverdale season 7 as we chug relentlessly forward on our march to the end of Riverdale. And I do feel we continue to slip towards the pit of true insanity. And I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for your time. This is your Ween signing off.